So it's being recorded. Hello, everyone. Those of you who have joined, and hello, Catherine. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Hello, Chikere. It's good to be here.
I know this is really exciting, right?
It's so exciting. I've been dying to have this conversation for a year.
I know, right? So we've been talking about this for such a long time. So before we delve in, I think it really is important that we introduce ourselves to everybody. And then we can really tell people what this is all about. This is all about empowerment. But I think, Catherine, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself to everyone, and then I will do the same.
Great. Hello, everyone. Great to be here. Great to be in this conversation. I'm Katherine Longhi. I am American born, British naturalized, and married to an Italian. My pronouns are she and her. In my life as a profession, I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, and I help multinational organizations get the best out of their people through an agenda of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Amazing. And Catherine, how did we meet? Because we've known each other for quite a while now, haven't we?
We met, I think it was, well, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, but I have a feeling it's closer to 10, and that's going to really freak me out
I know, right?
because time flies.
I know.
But I was an HR professional, you were a recruitment professional. Over the years, you were one of the few people in the whole recruitment industry that I felt like actually got me. Because when you're a candidate, you just want to belong places, like you're applying to jobs and you just want to belong somewhere. And it feels really, it's a harsh, process for the candidate. You feel rejected and down a lot of the times. And Chikere was always just someone I could have really honest conversations with and would also just commiserate, like, yeah, it is a tough system out there.
Mm,
Like keep
mm,
keep going. So
mm.
you're always someone who's empowered people your entire life.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's so funny. I do remember working in recruitment many, many years ago. And I think maybe I didn't fit in recruitment because I didn't fit into the box. I think a lot of recruitment people tend to fit in a box, and I wasn't one of those people. So that's probably why we connected. And hopefully we are shaking up the recruitment industry. So that is Catherine in a nutshell. And for those of you who know me, you may know me, may not know me. My name is Chikere, Chikere Igbokwe. My pronouns are she, her. And I work actively in the diversity space. It's something that I'm really, really passionate about. This is more than a business. This is about using my platform to create change. And I think when Catherine and myself had the conversation about doing something, we wanted to be brave, we wanted to be bold. We really did want to shake things up, right, Catherine? I think that was something that we wanted to do. And I think a lot of the times, we tend to play it safe when we have these conversations. And what we didn't want to do, we didn't want to play it safe. We wanted something that will really get people thinking, but also that will empower every single body. And I really hope that this is what will happen. We will be having a brave and bold conversation. This is all about Black History Month, not just for the month of October, but for 365 days of the year. And Catherine, you probably agree to me, this really is a call to action for all those amazing white women out there. We really want them to use their platform to create change, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Ladies, white ladies, we've been listening and learning for a long time. So if you've never listened before, definitely start listening.
Mhm.
And if you have been on the journey and listening and learning for more than a couple of months, I would say now is the time to move that into action. And this conversation today is going to really help you remove some of those barriers that have been stopping you from getting into action. And strangely, it's going to resemble a personal development conversation, which is a bit weird. But it's actually what makes the biggest difference in getting you into action and being really authentic. I was going to say allies, but I think there's a better word these days, which is accomplices. So yeah, dive let's just dive right in.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation, as Catherine mentioned, I worked in recruitment. I used to recruit HR professionals into a number of sectors. And, HR is full of amazing women, okay? And HR is full of a lot of white women as well. And I think a lot of the times when I spoke about diversity to them, and yes, I get it, this was pre 2020 when we were beginning to have braver and bolder conversations. Rightly so, we spoke about gender, but that was it. And that was where it stopped, And when we talk about anything else, it was like, oh, we can't talk about that. And I think this is why I wanted to have that conversation with you, because a lot of white women are in positions of power and influence, and they can use their platforms to create change. But I think a lot of the time this is not happening. And even today, whilst working in diversity, I still see the same thing. As a lot of women, a lot of white women just don't know what to do. So I think this conversation that both Katherine and myself will be having is beyond guilt, okay? I think I'll probably say this is all about empowerment and meaningful change. And I think, Katherine, what we want to say to everyone, to every single one of you, and those of you who will be watching this back, this talk is about empowering white women to use their influence to drive meaningful change, not about instilling guilt, okay? And you probably say to yourselves, why now? Why Black History Month? Okay, because Black History Month celebrates the contributions of Black people in the UK throughout history. And it also highlights the ongoing struggle for equality and equity. And I think this is a reminder that this work is necessary every single day of the year, not just for 31 days, for every single days. And Katherine, I'm sure you're going to agree with me. Conversations around race can be uncomfortable, but we must move beyond the discomfort to create a more just and equitable organization, society, community. Would you agree with me?
I would absolutely agree. And full on disclosure, as a DEI professional, my biggest challenge or discomfort, because we're supposed to know about all kinds of different
Yeah.
people, different genders, different sexual orientations, different races, different abilities, different religions, different, like we're supposed to know about everything, like all kinds of different people. And I actually used to find the conversation about race the most uncomfortable of all of the different characteristic categories.
Yeah.
And I also saw it as the biggest opportunity. So, Chikere, can I introduce this book?
Go for it.
A
Go for
lot of
it.
what a lot of what we're so Chikere gave me this book a year ago. It's called White Women: What You Already Know About Your Own Race and How to Do Better by Saira Rao and Regina Jackson. Um, this book is kind of like a white woman Bible. Like everything you ever wondered, like it is all covered and so much more. And a lot of the concepts we're going to be talking about today come from this book. And I just want to not only give out a shout out to Regina and Saira for writing this book, but you, Chikere, for having the courage to recommend this book to me. And also, we're going to be sharing a lot of the content, like a lot of my understanding of my white woman conditioning I learned through this book. And I
Yeah.
both want to credit everybody where credit is due, but also give you the link and the resource that if you want to work on dismantling some of these barriers in your thinking around
Mhm.
racism, it's super duper easy.
Yeah,
Like buy this book.
definitely. And you know something, Katherine? I wouldn't recommend that book to every single one of my white friends, okay? Because they're not ready for it. And the reason why I felt I wanted to recommend it to you, because I knew you were ready for it, okay? I knew giving you this book would not be an insult. I knew it wasn't the case of, oh my gosh, I'm not going to talk to Chikere again. And I think it was just for me, it was just, amazing that I gave you the book, you took it and you read it. And it's been almost like it's changed a lot of things for you, hasn't it? So why don't we dive in and talk about understanding the power of white women? Why don't we start with that?
Yeah. So, ladies, we have so much power. You have no idea. And I know that you are like, yeah, I can kind of get that intellectually. But
Mm,
I want you to understand that at a very, very cellular level, because we spend a lot of time, chapter two, we have a gender lens. Like we live in the world through the lens of we are the less dominant gender, and it's like a bull and a red flag to us. Like we spend our entire lives like, oh man, the patriarchy, like, oh, another aggression, man against woman.
Mhm.
And what we don't realize is that we are doing the exact same thing to women of color, and we have no idea.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
we do this in lots of different ways, which we'll go into a bit more. But
Mhm.
we have so much power that if we use power by speaking up for ourselves, like in the way that we feel victim, if we use that power to stand up to patriarchy at the same time as pulling up our sisters of color, the world would be a very different place. And I really invite you all, this is how I personally approach all of my work in life, whether that's my professional work or just in my personal life. I'm always looking for, where do I need to stand up for womanhood? Like, not white womanhood, but the collective womanhood. And that includes myself. And where do I need to be a voice for those that have a much dimmer, low volume voice than I do? And by doing that, it's not only like, oh, that sounds like the right thing to do, that sounds practical and helpful, but it also makes you feel so good that it reduces the impact you feel from that whole patriarchal
Mhm.
suppression. So
Mhm.
it's like a win-win. It's like the thing
Mhm.
you didn't even know. Like, being a better ally to people of color is in your best interest, is in our best interest.
Mhm.
Like, who knew?
Exactly, exactly. So, Catherine, what do you think the problem is? What's the issue? Why are white women not stepping up? What
Yeah.
is the problem?
Yeah. So the conditioning is strong. So this is a societal, educational, familial. So the education is strong that we are super busy
Mm.
and we need to be nice. These are
Mm.
kind of like chapters 1 to 3.
Mm.
We're conditioned to strive for perfection. This is unique to white women because guess what? The only way to white is a whiteness is a prerequisite for perfection.
Mhm.
Other races are disqualified from even attempting perfection
Mhm.
just by not being white.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
every time you're looking in the mirror, walking down the street, like that trying to be perfect thing is stopping you. And this book, White Women, goes into a whole lot of about the internal wiring that's happening to us. So that internal wiring is keeping us safe, not not taking big risks. We're
Mhm.
dominating people of color by policing. We're like the niceness police. We're
Mhm.
out there like anytime a person of color stands up for themselves, we're like, oh, that's not nice. Can you just
Mhm.
take that tone? Ooh,
Mhm.
you're angry. That's aggressive. If you just say it nicer, maybe you'd get what you want.
Mhm.
And frankly, niceness hasn't gotten us white women very far either. So I'm not sure why we're forcing that stick on other
Mhm.
people. Like it
Mhm.
doesn't it doesn't work for us. It doesn't really work for anybody. So Chikere, this is how white women uphold white supremacy, but then we're also operating within the systemic. There's the internal thing that's happening for us, and we're operating within that system of
Mhm.
oppression, and mostly just not knowing. So mostly relating to anti-racism work as another thing to do. And we're so busy. We're
Yeah.
so busy. It's Anti-racism work is like way down here. It's like the last thing on the agenda, and then it's constantly sliding. It constantly is, oh, didn't get to my anti-racism work today.
Yeah.
Whoopsies, maybe tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Brilliant. I think as we go along, we'll talk about some ways that, you can start to, break the cycle, start to use your platform to create change. It's a case of, and I'm a true believer, you've got to start with yourself. You've got to start with me. You've got to put the work in. And I think a lot of the times when I say to people, people say, oh, Chikere, where do I start? And I say, oh, you've got to start with yourself. You've got to educate yourself. And then it's like, oh, I haven't got time for this. I haven't got time to read a book, right? I haven't got time to be listening to a podcast. I haven't got time to create a safe space to have a conversation. I haven't got time for this. So we'll talk about some ways that, people can start doing that, because that's the only way you can create change. And I think a lot of the time when I talk about allyship, okay, because you have to be an ally before you become an accomplice. Allyship is hard work, Catherine, okay? Right? It's hard work. I haven't got time for this, right? I'm already a busy person. And not only is it hard work, it's that ongoing journey that never ends. You're constantly learning, unlearning, relearning, making a mistake, picking yourself up, dusting yourself off. We haven't got time for that. So we'll talk about, what everyone can do, right? What you can do.
Can I talk about, can I
Oh,
take 30 seconds on the whole
I
I
think you
don't
should
have
go for
time.
it.
I don't have time thing?
Go for it. Go for it.
It's a myth. It doesn't exist. If you only
Excuse.
do
Excuse.
if you only do one thing after this webinar, like please just stop saying it. Because
Mm,
stopping saying it is
agree.
the first thing.
I
If
agree.
you can replace that instead with a question, which is how much time am I willing to commit to this, proportionate to how important to you it is.
Mhm.
Start with 5. And chapter 1, perfectionism, you've got to suspend the, like, you're not going to do it perfect. You've actually got to do it badly a little bit to be able to do it well a lot. So
Totally.
start with how much time can I, where am I willing to make the time and to do what activity for what benefit?
I so agree.
Freedom.
I know, I so agree. And it's so funny you said that. I remember when I did a workshop and the client gave me some feedback and was like, everything was fine, apart from one person complained. And the person complained, guess what the person said? Chikere told us that we had to educate ourselves. So that was the feedback I got. And the person didn't like that I said that. And this is a person who didn't know anything, right? So because I said to them, go and educate yourself, right,
Uh,
about various issues, they didn't like it.
okay. Well, Chikere, you were supposed to solve all the problems in
I
that
was supposed to
training
solve
and
the
you didn't
problems, I know.
deliver.
It's a one and done, right? You come to the workshop, you do what needs to be done, and then that's it. You're completely au fait with all things diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Yeah, so you're right. I didn't do a good job. But that's quite interesting, okay? And I think we can try and link this to Black History Month, because I think for me, as a Black British person, Black History Month is well, Black history is very, very important to me. Okay. And for those of you who know me, I was born in the United Kingdom. In terms of my heritage, my mother is from the Caribbean. So Granny is part of the Windrush generation. And for those of you in the UK, you should know what the Windrush generation is. Okay. If you don't, I have got books that I can recommend to you. But please go and search and find out about what the Windrush
Chikere,
generation is.
can you actually just take 30 to 60 seconds? Because I do see we have some non-UK people on the call, and
Yeah,
I think that
yeah,
would be really
definitely.
helpful.
Definitely. So when we talk about the Windrush generation, they are the generation of Black people, generation of Caribbeans that came over after the Second World War, because the mother country called for them to try and help rebuild after the war. So you will find that lots of people in the medical profession came over. There were lots of bus drivers. They were coming over because they were asked to come and help rebuild the mother country. And that was how the United Kingdom was seen. So my grandmother, she was a nurse and she came over to help. But the problem is, a lot of these people who came over, they faced a lot of injustices, lots of racism, and it was a very terrible time for a lot of them. Um, Last year marked, I think, 75 years since the first ship docked in the UK. And there's an amazing monument in Waterloo Station to commemorate those who came over. So the Windrush generation really did help rebuild this country. And I think There's been so much that has gone on ever since. And my grandmother was one of those. And then in terms of my father is West African Nigerian. He came over on a scholarship, met my mother, and the rest is history. So really, when we talk about Black History Month, and in particular, the theme, reclaiming our narratives, I think Black History Month, October 2024, really is a powerful call to action, okay? Because I think, Katherine, for me and everyone else who's listening, it really does signify a shift from passively accepting historical narratives, which are often shaped by others, to actively centering and amplifying Black voices and perspectives. And purposely, Katherine, you probably noticed behind me, I have purposely put a number of books that hopefully you can see. So I've got this one here on Black History for every day of the year, which I'll talk about afterwards. And I've also got Black History London map. And I've done that purposely because I really want people to go out there and seek out education. So when we're talking about education, it really, really is important. Okay. Now, when we talk about, reclaiming our narratives, a lot of people say, Chikere, what does that exactly mean? Okay. And I think for me, it means challenging those dominant narratives. And I think for centuries, the stories of Black people, my history, have been told often through the lens that minimizes our contributions, minimizes the contributions of my grandmother, of my mother, of my father. Okay. It distorts our experiences. And also think about all those harmful stereotypes, that we hear about. And reclaiming our narrative really does mean challenging these dominant narratives and presenting a more accurate picture of Black history and culture in the United Kingdom. Okay. And I think, Katherine, you probably agree with me, when we talk about Black history, it almost feels really different to where you're from in America. Okay. Because we know, right, that a lot of African Americans, their ancestors were enslaved. Okay, a lot of my ancestors were enslaved. Okay, so we visibly, it's almost like you can see the link. Oh, these are why we have Black people in our country. And I think a lot of the times with the UK, there isn't that link. People don't quite get it, right? People are like, oh, okay. People almost think that Black people haven't been here for a long time. And I'll go into that as we talk about it. But do you understand where I'm coming from, Katherine?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a different history. So it's a history that has a lot of similarities, but it also
Yes.
has some distinct differences.
Yes.
And I was on a podcast last week with an African American gentleman from North Carolina, and
Mm.
he was asking me about Italy and racism in Italy, and if there were indigenous people in Italy. And I was like, oh gosh, I never thought about it. People indigenous Europeans are white people.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like like but it's white people who went to all the other continents that have been dominating people. I'm
Mm.
using that word very generally because in places like North America, USA, and parts of the Caribbean, people were brought from Africa and enslaved, like brought
Yes.
against their will.
Exactly.
Distinct from the UK, which although it had slaves outside of its territories, or at least got rid of them inside of its territories in the late 1700s, inside the Isle, the British Isles, in the late 1700s, it always struck me that Black people were invited. It was like, come, like, help, like, we need your skills, like, you're so valuable. Like, the invitation was, you have something of value. We recognize that value. And then what was delivered is we're just going to steal that value, like, essentially steal that value
Yeah.
without giving you back what we promised we would
Yeah.
give you, which is
Yes.
such a betrayal.
It is definitely a betrayal. But do you know the funny thing about the Black history in the UK? And this is something I only found out last year. So I've been doing a lot of research on Black history. And what I found out last year was that Black people have been in the United Kingdom for centuries. Okay. Because remember, we're not taught this. I was never taught this at school. I was never told. And this is what, when we talk about reclaiming our narratives, These are the kind of things that we need to know, okay? With their presence dating back to various historical periods. So even in Roman Britain, there's evidence to suggest that Black individuals, likely of African descent, were present in Roman Britain, which existed from AD 43 to the early 5th century. And some of these individuals may have been soldiers, traders, and even slaves, okay? And if you think about it, the British Empire existed from the late 16th century to the mid 20th century. It went through various stages of expansion and contraction during this time period. And English explorers and traders established colonies, which is what we have been talking about, and trading posts in places like North America and the Caribbean. So obviously, if you think about the transatlantic slave trade, so that's around the 18th century. So during this period, we had enslaved Africans, okay, brought to the UK, right, where they served as domestic servants, laborers, and various roles. And some of these Black individuals gained their freedom and settled in this country, okay? And then just what we were talking about, the Windrush generation, my grandmother, my mother. So that's post World War II immigration. So after the Second World War, there was significant immigration into the UK from the former British colonies, okay, in the Caribbean and Africa. So even Nigeria, which is my heritage country, they were part of the British Empire, as well as Trinidad and Tobago on my mother's side, okay? And then we had the arrival of the Windrush generation in 1948, named after the Empire Windrush, which is the first ship that sailed from the Caribbean. So that marked a major wave of Caribbean immigration. And if you look at it now, there's just ongoing immigration. So Katherine and everyone else, it was just, for me, I'm learning, right? And this is why education really is important. This is why we're talking about the narrative and really changing it. Just to know that Black people have been in the United Kingdom for centuries, okay? And we're not told about that.
That is wild. So you blew my mind with Black
Exactly.
Romans. So
Thank
first of all, and
you.
I was about to share that I recently learned about Blacks in the Tudor. There were Black Tudors, like
Yes.
actually with royal, like in
Yes.
close proximity to the royal courts. But Romans go back way farther, so you win.
Yes.
Um, and I wanted to share this about reclaiming narratives. I think that is just such a timely theme for this year, because the narrative has always been controlled by white people or whiteness. It's always been, well, first of all, it's always been recorded. So even just like existence, like the system of counting people has
Yes.
always been um has always been done by white people, and then the narratives written by white people and whiteness informing everything. And learning these, like, oh my gosh, Black Romans, Black Tudors, like black, like it for me as a white person, it's kind of like, wow, I never knew. Like, that is just so cool, that is just so amazing. I just want everyone to know that.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's so funny you talking about the whole record and everything. You know, I think the British are really good at keeping records and things like that. But if you look at the transatlantic slave trades, okay, they didn't keep, okay, they kept records, but they didn't keep records that I would love to know, right? For someone like myself, who on my mother's side, my ancestors were enslaved Africans, there are no records to say they came from this country in West Africa. There is nothing. There's no names, okay? They're just numbers, right? They're just
Is it
numbers.
like, is it like weight and height and
Exactly.
like,
Exactly.
yeah, oof.
You know, and I think for me, that every time I think about it, I just think that's so cruel and so horrible. Okay. So it's quite interesting, again, linking to the theme of reclaiming our narrative, that we have this conversation and we say this because I think, again, it's just really, really important that we know this.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, really important. So I guess what's really important, Katherine, is that we talk about some, Britons, some, celebrating Black British people. And I think for me, I'll leave a list of books that you can you can read. But I think for me, it really is important that we link it to Britain, because I think a lot of the times when we talk about blackness, we do go across to your side of the pond, Catherine. It's a lot, there's lots of information about African Americans, okay? But there's not a lot of information in terms of my side of the pond. So if we look at Black history, rightly so, we go to Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And what about all the British ones? Where are they? Did they exist? And again, it's all about that reclaiming narratives, right? A lot of people feel they didn't exist, right?
Mm.
So I think it really is important that we can talk about some Black British people, you know, and you know something, I'll talk about my grandma. You know, I think for me, you know, Esme came over full of hope and joy. She wanted a new life, and she came over and she, you know, worked in the NHS until she, you know, for a very long time. I think it was all over 40 years, you know. She faced a lot of discrimination. I remember her saying that, you know, there was a time she went to church in Southampton and the priest came up to her, and this was probably in the 60s, and told her she wasn't allowed in church because of the color of her skin. Okay. And I think for me, you know, that is really shocking. And that's why the West Indian Church in Southampton was founded. But these, again, controlling the narrative, a lot of people don't know that. You know, grandma often talks about, you know, when she used to work in the hospitals, you know, people who say, don't touch me, used to call her derogatory names as well, but she still worked. And if you think about it, you know, a lot of Black people suffer from mental illnesses, and we can, you know, I can understand why, because my grandmother did, and I understand why she suffered from mental illnesses. That systemic racism that she went through, it must have been really, really difficult for her. And I'm sure she wanted to go back home one day, you know, and she never did. She died. She's died, and she's buried in Southampton, right? So I think when we talk about amazing Black British people, I really want to, you know, give a shout out to my grandmother, you know, because she did really fly the flag. Let me see if I can share my screen, because I've got a few others that I would like to talk about as well. If I can't, yeah, here we go. I just want to show you just a few more people. Hopefully, can you see my screen? Can you see Olive Morris on there, Catherine?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got Olive Morris, and she's another person that I really want you all to look up, because when I found out about her, it was like, oh my goodness, she was amazing. So she was a community activist in South London. So I live in South East London. So she apparently round the corner. And what she did, she fought for Black women's rights in the UK. But what was really, really sad was that she faced a lot of racism. And I think what was even more sad was that she died really young. She was only 27 when
Oh
she died of cancer.
my gosh.
I know, but again,
What a life.
what a I
Wow,
know
what she accomplished 27 years.
so many things. So definitely look her up. Okay. And then we have Olivette Otel. So she works for SOAS. So that's a school, that's a university, a college, School of African Oriental African Studies. And she used to be professor of slavery at Bristol University. And she's the first Black British woman to be appointed to a professor chair in history in the United Kingdom. Isn't that amazing? You know, that's amazing. And again, a lot of people have never heard of her. So she's another one. And then we have Baroness Doreen Lawrence. Have you heard of Doreen Lawrence at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we know about Doreen Lawrence. Her son was killed not far from where I live, actually, in a racist attack in 1993. And she has been amazing. She has brought the attention to the problems of racism in the London police force. And she now sits in the House of Lords, and she has continued her work on racial equality and equity. And she is phenomenal. I've seen her a couple of times, and you know, just to say hello. She's just very humble, and you can see the pain etched, you know, in her face. So she's
Yeah.
amazing. And then
Just for our American viewers, Stephen Lawrence was the UK's George Floyd, but happened in the 1990s.
he was a
So
teenager. He was only 19.
murdered teenager by like a gang of five white
Yeah.
men who
Who were never
I
convicted. Who were never convicted.
I thought something
Horrendous.
recent happened. Like I thought there was a retrial, like maybe in the last couple. Anyway, it's like kudos to his mom who could have just, slowly died from the pain of
Mm.
losing a child in such a horrific way.
Really horrific.
But
Really,
yeah,
really horrific. Yeah. And then we have more. We have Olada Ekwano. He was born in southeast Nigeria, again my heritage country, and he was enslaved as a child, shipped to the Caribbean, and sold to the Royal Navy to a Royal Navy officer. And he purchased his freedom in 1766. And he spoke out about the transatlantic trade, slave trade, and he became a well-known abolitionist. So again, he's another person. But you know something? There's so many more. We have Valerie Blackman, who's an author. Idris Elba, surely we all know Idris Elba, an actor. Darkest Hour, who's a campaigner, Bernie Grant. So just a number of people. And what I would say to you all is, definitely look these names up. It's all, we're claiming our narrative. We're talking about, Black British people who've contributed and they've done some really, really amazing things. So I really want you all to definitely look them up, right? I think that's what's really important. But I think, Katherine, I think what we said that we wanted this to be a call to action. We wanted this to be empowering. So I think we should talk about allyship, really, shouldn't we?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because it does, and I think you will probably agree with me, it does start with allyship. And I have a lot of people say to me, "Oh, Chikere, why should I be an ally? Nothing's going to happen." And Katherine, you know this, right? To achieve the most impact, everyone can and should be part of the conversation. Have their
Yeah.
voice heard and be part of real change. Okay.
Yeah.
So I really want every single one of you to think of your role. Think of your role in creating change. Think about what you can do, right? And I think importantly, think about what it means to be an ally. Because I think when I think about allyship, there's just not one definition, okay, for allyship. Because for me, allyship is lots of different things. But if we just had to quickly have a definition for allyship, I'll probably say an ally actively engages in actions that challenge and dismantle oppressive systems, and they work towards creating a more equitable society. But that's just one of many, many, many more definitions. Would you agree
I
with me,
love,
Kathy?
yeah, I love that. I love that definition. Because it starts with the what it is, the takes action,
Mm.
dismantles oppressive systems.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, I think that's what it's all about. And I invite my white ladies who might be feeling, even though I'm in this work, I still feel that as you're um not selling it, but as you're like describing it and encouraging towards it, I can even feel like the nausea kind of ride up, like, oh, what can I do? Is it going to be, perfect? Like, but what if I fail? What if I look bad and nothing's going to happen? Like, I could feel myself going through that sort of spiral as you were
Mm.
describing it. And one thing that helps take the pressure off me when I sort of spiral that I've got to do this grand gesture that's going to impact hundreds of people, I go back to, what's one thing I can do today? What's one small thing I can do today?
Yeah,
That's
totally.
that's it.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, Katherine, I normally have a lot of white women saying to me, Chikere, where do I start? Okay. And Katherine, as my friend, as my ally, as my accomplice, I'm going to say, what would you say to that? Where should they start?
Yeah, I can't plug this book enough. Um
But remember, not
start
everyone will be ready for that book.
but it's so good, but it's so good.
I know, but not
Okay.
everyone will be.
So where to start is what's meaningful for you. Like, what do you care about? What do you care about in society? What maybe it's your school, maybe it's your children, maybe it's an educational system you're in. Where do you get like super duper annoyed to the point, like when you listen to the news, which I don't recommend, by the way, but sometimes you're in an airport lounge and can't help it.
Yeah.
um when you hear like the injustices in the world,
Oh,
what's the thing that pisses you off what's the thing that you're like, oh, for F's
mm,
sake,
mm, mm.
someone should be doing something about that
Mhm,
thing.
mhm, mhm.
Spoiler alert, you are the person that's meant to be doing something about that thing. And whatever that thing is, it's not helped by racism,
Yes.
whatever it is. So
Hmm.
there will always be some kind of small action,
Hmm.
whether that's joining a community, donating your time, um, writing a weekly social media post, uh, joining white women in a book club. There's always some small action you can take that is gonna positively impact whatever it is that you truly care about. For some of us, we truly care about racism. Like racism is our thing. Like we
Hmm.
truly care about that.
Hmm.
And and racism impacts everything.
Hmm. Hmm.
So there's always something. There's always something. And if you can't think of anything, if you can't think of where to
Yeah, I
start with
totally agree.
education.
And that's the key thing, right? I think that's to start to educate yourself. And as I said, I can provide you with a list of books and podcasts and TED Talks and you name it that you can start with. And another thing that a lot of people say to me is, oh my gosh, they feel like it's taken something away from them. Okay.
Mhm.
I get that a lot. It's like, oh, if I'm an ally, if I'm doing this anti-racism work, what's going to happen to me? you know and you find that a lot, especially when you talk about recruiting diverse talent. People think, what's going to happen to me, what's going to happen to me, what's going to happen to my children, what's going to happen to the next white person. It's about taking something away, but it's not, is it? It's not about taking anything away.
Yeah, and we know this, right? So oftentimes, so as women,
Mm.
we're all in a minority group being
Mhm.
a woman. And
Yes.
then some of us are also in other minority groups, whether that is racial minorities or even sexual orientation minorities or even able minority. Like then that's where intersectionality comes in. So we already know as women that this thing that men have, that like, oh, if women have gender equality, like men are going to suffer. Like we already know it doesn't work that way, right? So we can't fool ourselves that it's the same for like we already know that doesn't add up. And what's at play there is simply the lack mindset or the lack mentality. Um, and if you can distinguish your mindset and just know, haha, there it goes again, doing that funny little, I don't have time, and
All the
I,
excuses, all the
yep,
excuses.
yeah, they are just that,
Yeah,
excuses.
yeah.
So education, both in terms of racism, but also in terms of healthy mindset.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as allies, because when we look at allyship, the concept of allyship is exactly the same for each marginalized group we're showing allyship towards. And I think as allies, we've got to be careful, right? We've got to know what allyship looks like, and we've got to know what performative allyship looks like. And that's why sometimes for Black History Month or Pride Month, it does look quite performative. Okay. So when we look at that whole performative allyship, I don't know, empty gestures, social media posts without real action. And that's what happens during these months. So now it's everything black, black this, black that, black the other. But come November, that all dies down. Okay. So I really want you all to think about, how can I authentically be an ally? Okay. So it could be something as simple as speaking up against microaggressions at work, mentoring a Black colleague, advocating for equitable policies. Do you agree with me, Catherine?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all really important.
you know um and obviously I come from a recruitment background as well. Think about hiring practices. What can I do to make sure I diversify the candidates that are coming through the organization? How do I diversify interview panels? And I think like some of my clients are doing some really, really good work. So we've got like mentorship programs, so creating programs specifically for Black employees, for example. Addressing bias in performance reviews and promotion criteria. There are lots of Black young people who are leaving schools and universities and just finding it really difficult to, get jobs, get graduate jobs. So, I've got clients who have internships and they focus specifically on people of color, right? Graduate programs that again focus on, people of color. The little things that you can do to really help, I guess, make sure that, your allyship actions are actions and not performative, empty gestures.
Yeah. And that can get a bit overwhelming. So if you just looked at a calendar and all of the different diversity days, like every day of the year, there's something. I saw a post, a very poignant, a very powerful and tragic post about child loss day and week,
Oh,
or
wow.
and I had like a friend of mine disclosed that she'd had 8 miscarriages over a 2 year period. So every day of the year, there's something. You just got to pick. Don't go along with just whatever the day, the week, the month. Like, have a little bit of forward planning, like maybe a quarter, maybe take it quarter by quarter, and direct your energy and your focus where it's most meaningful for you, and don't just jump on the like bandwagon. And actually, I'm going to be really direct. Like, if you came on this call because you were curious, and actually you've just gotten your, that was interesting, like, bye, like don't support Black History Month. Whoa,
Yeah.
Katherine, I can't believe I just said that. But it's like,
Mm.
it's much better for you to choose powerfully where
Yes.
you want to be an ally than
Yes.
just follow whatever day of the year it is,
I
which
agree.
will be performing by default.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. So if we look about becoming an ally, and especially because it's Black History Month, I'll probably say um, becoming an anti-racist ally, okay, we know it's commitment, okay, and it's that commitment to actively work against racism and support those marginalized communities. So as we were saying, people, oh, Chikere, Katherine, where do I start? And I think, Katherine, you started with educate yourself, okay? And I totally agree. Education is key. You have got to put the work in, not myself, not Katherine. We do anyway, right? But we're not going to put the work in for you, right? You've got to educate yourself. And you can begin by educating yourself about the history of racism, systemic racism, and the impact on marginalized communities. And we have got some books that we will be sharing with you at the end. But Katherine, that education piece, I cannot reiterate it more. Education, 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 learning, unlearning, relearning. Oh, let's start again. That's what
And
you've got to do.
can I add something to that formula? The learning, learning, learning. Please add share about your learning, because that's actually the gateway out of the listening and learning loop.
I agree.
Like you're never going to be ready. Like, if you just keep listening and learning, and you get stuck in that loop, and you're like prevented from taking action because you don't know enough yet, sharing
Yeah.
about what you're learning is a like low risk way to take those first actions
Yeah.
apart from learning. It's like the next step after
Totally.
learning.
Totally. I totally agree. And another thing I say to people, part of being an ally is that we listen. We just listen. So we're listening to the experiences of, people of color, okay, without judgment or defensiveness. And I think the problem, there's a lot of defensiveness, okay. And I often say to people, seek out their voices and stories, okay, through books, podcasts, social media, speak to your colleagues at work, surely you have got people of color at work, speak to them. Really, really important. Katherine, do you agree with me?
Yeah, and something simple for this month is just, yeah, so how you feeling about Black History Month?
Mhm.
I know I have a visceral reaction to International Women's Day on March 8th. It's my least favorite day of the
Ah,
year.
yeah,
If someone actually asked me, how do you actually feel? I'd probably burst into tears.
right.
So even just ask, I know this is about celebration, but
Yeah,
also your Black friends and colleagues might be dealing with
yeah.
well, it's the same old bullshit. It's the
It
same
is.
month rolling
It
around
is.
like
It
every
is.
year.
Like every year. I totally agree. Totally agree. Another thing we say, and I think, Katherine, you're going to laugh, we talk about recognizing your privilege. Recognizing your privilege, and I think a lot of the times when we talk about privilege, and in particular white privilege, again, barriers go up. I've worked really hard to get to where I am. So when we talk about white privilege, again, Katherine, that's something else that people tend to complain about. Chikere spoke about white privilege, and I felt really uncomfortable.
It's not bad, y'all. It's good. So I don't know if you know any of the origins of the word privilege, but like think like once upon a time, I don't know, like industrial New York, like new money in industrial New York.
Right.
It's like privilege was like charity, like paying it forward, like and society women would like compete with one another who could do the, I mean, it was performative allyship, the original performative allyship, but they could do that when like they were only like 1% of women who could actually do that. Privilege today in the modern world in 2024 is the cards we've been dealt. Like we've been
Yes.
dealt
Yes.
poker hand, a great poker hand. So we just got to play the flush. Like and it's so great. It's so rewarding when you
Yeah.
do get to do it. But
Yeah.
what stops you is the performative allyship that the other people are looking. You've got to start doing it for your own curiosity, like your own benefit. Like,
Yeah.
I've never said that before. I'm going to try that today, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah, totally. And you know what's really funny? It's almost like complaining about something you don't even know what it means. So you're complaining about white privilege. Okay, tell me what it means. You can't tell me what it means, but yet you're complaining about it. Okay. So what I say to people is recognize your privilege, learn about your privilege, learn about the different types of privileges that exist. And because it's Black History Month, learn about white privilege. Okay. Which is really, really important. And obviously, when we talk about being an ally, we talk about speaking up. Okay, challenge bias. If you see something, say something. So when you witness microaggressions or racism, bias, speak up and challenge it. Use your privilege to confront all these injustices, even in uncomfortable situations. And I know it would take time to get to that space, that place. But this is something that we have to do as allies. And I think, Katherine, you probably agree with me. Your radars are probably up, right? When we're completely immersed in this, I know, completely immersed in this work, we see everything, don't we?
I'm definitely more alert than I used to be. Like, I used to have such foggy windshield, like such a foggy windshield that you would have to use the windshield wipers to like be able to see anything through. Um, they're clearer, and it's like I'll be working on it for the rest of my life. But I think one of the things that stops white women from speaking up and calling out, or even is that a lot of the times we don't even recognize it. So it starts by just being curious. Like
Yes.
you don't have to decide, was that a microaggression or not? The
Mhm.
first step is to actually ask, like, whoa, can I just recap what happened here? This
Exactly.
person did this,
Exactly.
that person did this, they said that. Can I just check?
Yeah,
I could
totally.
that be racist? Like, could there be racist
Exactly.
undertones? Is that
Exactly.
like, could it be a
Yeah,
microaggression? What do you think?
exactly. Hmm.
And you got to be able to deal with people might not agree with you. So you might be thinking you're seeing racism in motion. That might not be what other people are seeing. But
Hmm.
just by saying, hey, can we just look at what just happened here? Can we talk about that? That is the first step. Just do that.
And you're so right. Those little questions are so important. Chikere, what did you just say? Can you clarify what you've just said? And that will make the other person think. So yeah, totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. So we've spoken about amplifying voices, using your platform, whether it's at work, within your social circles, um, online, to amplify those marginalized voices and communities, share their stories. Really, really important. So we've spoken about that. Another thing that I think is really important is that self-reflection, that holding that mirror up to yourself, Katherine, and continuously self-reflect on your biases, on your prejudices, challenge, unlearn, relearn, and just be aware of them. Do you agree? Be aware
Yeah,
of them.
I do. And this doesn't have to be a painful or self-flagellating kind of activity. It can just be journaling and reflection and asking and being curious and, You are not, you are neither a good person nor a bad person. Well, actually, you're both. You are a good person and a bad person. And I do believe people are fundamentally good in their makeup, and sometimes our behaviors are not good. Sometimes we do things that are bad actions and we make
Yes.
bad decisions, and we can come back from that if we're willing to just look and ask, like, hey, did what I just say, how did you react to what I just said? Or how did you react to what I just did?
Totally. I totally agree. And I'm aware of the time, but I think, what we want, we really want to empower everybody. And I think, Katherine, you mentioned it's about moving beyond allyship, but we totally get it that some of you have just started on your journey. So you still be, in the allyship space. But we really want you all to start thinking about, okay, all this work I've got to put in, I need to move from being an ally to an accomplice. And when we look at being an accomplice is a bit more direct, a bit more action involved. So, for example, an accomplice will actively challenge racist systems and structures, even when it's risky or uncomfortable. We're braver and we're bolder, okay? So, for example, at work could be what we were just talking about, Katherine, that challenging biased comments and actions, maybe in a meeting. Another thing you can all do is advocate for pay equity and equal opportunities for your Black employees and friends and colleagues, and using your position to create a more inclusive and anti-racist workplace culture. And then, as Katherine and myself were saying, it does involve that long-term commitment, right? You're constantly educating yourself. And I think this is what we really want you all to know. I guess we will say, don't feel afraid, okay? You really have to, I guess, commit to doing this 365 days of the year,
Yeah,
right?
I would say face the fear and do it anyway. Because
Yeah,
there will be fear. Like,
yeah,
so you
of course.
can't wait until you're not afraid. You actually just have to go, all right,
Yeah,
I'm doing it. Here we
yeah,
go. Doing it.
totally, totally. So don't let that fear of doing it prevent you. And I think what I really want you all to start thinking about, we both do, is what are you going to commit to? That one concrete action you would take away from today. We want you to think about that continuous learning and growing in your understanding of race in particular, because it's Black History Month and we're talking about race. So race and equity, and using your voice and influence to really create lasting change. And Katherine, whilst you're talking, if you've got anything to talk about, I just want to share my screen, because on my screen, I've got some great books by Black British authors that I would like to share. So I'll just share that. Is there anything else you would like to say?
Um, on the way out, I would just say, just take one small action, whatever it is. Don't wait for it to be perfect. Just take the first one you think of. And Chikere and I here for you if you know, come and talk to us afterwards. If you want to see if you're ready for this book, we can help you decide if you're ready for that book.
Yeah,
Also, if you are an HR professional and you're having these kinds of conversations at work, you can also pick up a copy of my book, The Inclusion Illusion, and
please,
I'll
definitely.
put a link in the chat where you can get a free digital copy. So anyway, this is by a Black and brown author. This one isn't, but Chika is
It
going to
doesn't
share with
matter,
us
you're an
now other
ally.
great reading.
Yeah, but also,
Exactly.
Katherine, I think I often have people say to me, oh, Chikere, I shouldn't really be part of the conversation. A lot of my amazing white friends, and I have got some amazing, amazing, amazing white friends. And what I would say, you need to be part of the conversation because we need you. I need you. So don't think, oh, I shouldn't be talking about anti-racism because I'm not Black or I'm not brown. You should be. Okay. So really think about what you can do. And as I said, the book I shared with Katherine, not everybody would be ready for that book because that book is mind blowing. So what I would say is a really great book to start, and you can listen to it. There's no excuses. I'm not going to accept any excuses from any of you. Why I'm no longer talking to white people about race is fantastic. It's on screen. Okay. And that's a great starting point, really great starting point. I do lots of allyship workshops that you can attend. The next cohort of the Allyship Ambassador Program starts in January. So definitely ask me about that. But there's so much you could do. And I really hope that this session is a call to action, because we want to hear from you, right? I really want this to be a call to action. Now, there is a question and answer button. Are there any questions that anybody would like to ask? I'm aware it's 2 minutes past 1 now. Otherwise, you know, contact both myself and Catherine, and we'll definitely, be happy to have a chat with you about anything.
I've also put why I'm no longer talking to white people about race, the Amazon link in the chat as well.
Amazing. Amazing. Right. So both Catherine and myself would be doing a bit more of these purposeful conversations. And yeah, so we'll be doing some more. So look out for the link. But yeah, really want to say thank you all for being here. Thank you, my dear friend Catherine. Thank you for
Yeah.
amplifying my voice and having this conversation with me. It means a lot. And just keep doing the
Thank
really
you.
good work that you're doing.
Thank you, my dear friend. And thank you all for coming. And pretty much everyone stayed to the top of the hour. So I think that means this has been valuable. So please share it. Keep learning, keep taking action.
Definitely. Bye. Bye, everyone. Bye.